This is LifeTalk Radio. On this episode of LifeTalk Radio, we are dedicated to shedding light on the devastating realities of human sex trafficking. I'm your host, Dana LeBlanc, and today we want to invite you to join us as we delve into the dynamics of this prevailing issue that is plaguing the globe and the Central Valley. And our discussion today is with an expert in the field. I'm going to introduce him here in just a moment. But first, if LifeTalk Radio is adding value to your life and we're providing you with actionable strategies, we would love to hear about that, because at the end of the day, it really is all about our listeners, and your comments are invaluable to the success of this show. So we want you to like, share, comment, subscribe to any of our social media platforms. Where there is a social, we can be found. We're on YouTube, we're on Spotify, Apple Music. Again, wherever there is a social, LifeTalk Radio is there. And without further delay, I want to introduce my guest. His name is Mr. Troy Stein. Is it Stein or Steen?
It's Stein.
It's Stein. Awesome. And Troy is the CEO of Without Permissions. Sir, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, Dana. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, man. Yeah. It's, I'm so pleased that you are here today. We're going to have a tough conversation today. Yeah. But I think it's something that is very necessary for people to hear, because human trafficking is plaguing not just our nation, but the world, but more importantly, maybe not more important, but just as important, here on a local level in the Central Valley. And you have been working in this industry, in this field for some time now. Right. And we're going to talk about those things today here on LifeTalk Radio. Why don't you just go ahead and greet the guest and tell them who you are? I'll give your bio in just a moment.
Sounds good. Right on. Hey, it's good to see y'all. My name is Troy Stein, and I'm pleased to lead the organization of Without Permission. Without Permission it's got one sole lane, and that lane is to battle and to eradicate sex trafficking right here at home, here in the Central Valley.
Yes,
so
sir.
Good to be with you.
Yeah, man. I'm really excited to talk to you about this now. I feel at a little disadvantage in the conversation because I have no knowledge of this at all. I've done some research, and but still, you're boots on the ground. And you have information that is from the perspective of boots on the ground, and you're an expert in this area. So I'm looking forward to leaning in and hearing what you have to say about this. But our goal today is to help you shed some light into this devastating, situation that's plaguing the Central Valley.
It really is. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, so Troy, your agency is leading the charge here in the Central Valley against human sex trafficking, which really is a form of modern day slavery. Is that correct?
Yeah, they say there's 29 million people worldwide, globally, that are ensnared in human trafficking. That really has two lanes, labor trafficking and sex trafficking, but together it's 29. There's more people in human trafficking, in slavery today than there ever has been in the course of human history.
Wow. It's funny because I guess we don't see that, and it's probably all around us, but it's not in our house, so to speak. And so we're probably ignorant to the fact that it is so prevalent in the area. And so we're going to, again, discuss some of those things today, hopefully highlight some of the aspects of human trafficking, specifically human sex trafficking here in the Central Valley. I love your vision and your promise. It's clear, it's concise. Your vision is to that you exist to end sex trafficking here in the Central Valley. You just said that. And I love the promise that you're giving to your victims and people that have been victimized, is to restore the victimized, to educate the youth, to prevent sex trafficking, and to attack the lies that are driving the demands of human sex trafficking.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Talk about that just for a second, my friend.
Right on. So we've got that three pillars really in Without Permission. The first pillar is restoration. Most of our resources are spent on restoring the survivors.
Sure.
We tend to call them survivors as opposed to victims because it reclassifies them, but the survivors of sex trafficking need a long game approach to not just bringing them out of the game, but then restoring them into a productive, healthy good life that we want to give them. In addition to that, we do prevention as a second pillar. That's the one where we're in the schools. We do a program called #NotAPriceTag.
Yeah.
And so we're in the schools trying to educate our youth, trying to let them know that they should be not only looking for vulnerabilities in themselves, but in their peers. And then finally, it's the justice piece. We work with the district attorney's office, and we work with probation and juvenile hall and so forth to try to identify those CSEC kids. CSEC stands for commercially sexually exploited children, and we can identify them oftentimes when they're incarcerated, when they're brought in. And so we're the agency that partners with probation and so forth to try to discover those kids.
Absolutely. And we're going to dig into that here in just a moment. Let me just read a little bit about Troy. It's a very heartfelt bio that you sent over to me. It's, a lot of people, when they send their bio, it's really all about them, their family, their kids. But yours is not, man. It's really about the initiative and the problem that we're facing today. And it says this. It says, Troy has been a pastor for the past 28 years. After planting several churches in the Central Valley, he felt dedicated to accept the position of CEO of Without Permission, which is a local Christian organization whose sole mission is to eradicate sex trafficking. Troy and his staff of 16 full-time team members, along with over 40 navigators, we'll talk about that in just a moment, and nearly 500 community volunteers lead the charge to restore hope and normalcy for those who have been victimized. Do me a favor. I want to talk about that bio just a moment. Give me that phrase, though, that you just used. They're not victims. They're survivors. They're survivors. Yeah. Okay. I love that. Why? What's the approach behind that?
Well, the approach, we don't want to create a victim mindset in them. We want them to know that they are survivors and they've come through.
Yeah.
And we're going to help them bring them through to the next level and even beyond.
Sure.
Yeah.
So you're looking to empower them.
Totally.
Okay.
Empower them spiritually, physically, emotionally, every single way. Yeah.
That's so good, man. Yeah. I've talked about a victimized or victim's mentality on previous shows, and it really is devaluing, and you give your power away when you operate in that mindset. And, I love the survivor mentality, and it shows strength and fortitude and aptitude, and it just shows so many other wonderful traits. So thank you for doing that. Yeah. So let's talk about your bio just for a second.
Sure.
I think you're losing your earpiece over there. Is it coming off? It's all good. It happens. It goes behind your ear. It's all good. It's all good. I love the fact that LifeTalk Radio, although we strive for excellence and quality, hey man, little things like that happen all the time, right?
They do, yes.
I had a guy, his earpiece kept falling out, but it's all good. So let's talk about your bio just for a moment. So you're a pastor, and you've been pastoring for the past 28 years. Talk about that just for a moment.
Yeah. I was a school teacher. My wife and I got married very young. A school teacher for a few years. The Lord called us into ministry. We were children's pastors at a couple of different churches, and then we stepped into the role of lead pastoring, and we've been doing that for a long time. And so when we moved to the Central Valley some 13, 14 years ago, we knew that God was bringing us here to start a church, and we discovered that Lathrop was the place we were going to do that initially. And then from there, we went on this multiplication journey where God has helped us to kind of multiply that, because we're trying to find neighborhoods that don't have churches or have a low number of churches compared to the population. So we're just grateful to be able to do that. And now the mantle's been passed to our executive pastor, and I get to do this as kind of a missional thing for the rest of my life. Yeah. Sure.
So I know that you were not the founder of Without Permissions.
Right.
So how did this opportunity come to you? Tell the audience about your burden for this, and how God brought this into your life.
Sure. So we've always been I've always been passionate about battling and eradicating trafficking around the world. We worked with several different agencies in the past as a pastor and supporting, but those initiatives for me were not satisfactory. It was like I had a dissatisfied satisfaction with it because I wasn't really doing anything. I felt like I was just contributing, which is great economically, but I wanted to do more. And then through my journey as a pastor, at the same time, Debbie Johnson, the founder of Without Permission, she was trailblazing as well.
I had the opportunity to meet her.
What a great lady.
She was awesome.
Powerhouse for the kingdom.
Awesome. Yeah.
And so she graduated to heaven this last fall after a battle with cancer. And then I was asked to step into the position and into some big shoes to be able to fill those. And so far, it's been a great ride and a good journey and a good mesh with me and the team. We've got an incredible staff. We've added several more staff members and expanded even quite a bit our services to 3 different counties in addition to that. So,
man. Yeah. So right now you have 16 full-time team members, over 40 navigators. Before I get there, so again, you mentioned that your pastorate was really, the part of the foundation of that was sex trafficking. Why? Why? How did you all get involved in that? Did you know someone that was a victim, that was a survivor, or kind of talk about that just for a moment?
Well, it's very close to my heart. We have 4 daughters, now 4 grown daughters. We have 6 granddaughters. It's very important that I protect them. It's kind of an interesting story. When I was a kid, I experienced abuse and trauma myself. And then so I met a young girl in high school who has now been my wife for 35 years.
Oh, wow.
and she also came out of incredible abuse and incredible trauma from her. It was familial from her family. And so we kind of raised each other and went on this journey, but always had a heart for the broken, the downhearted, those that are lost and least in society. And so sex trafficking became a very integral part. It's very close to our hearts. And so, we decided we wanted that to be an initiative that we always supported with the church. And then when this opportunity afforded itself, I'm like, you know what, God, I know without a doubt you are calling me into this. There was not a hesitation at all. It's like it's time to step forward and do what I can.
Right. I love that, man. That's the heart of God. And it can span over many different fields, and yours landed in the sex trafficking field. And so God is using you in that area, and it's not a very common ministry, man, but God has chosen you to do that, and He's chosen the right person.
Well, God bless you, brother. Appreciate that.
God is good. God is good. So so you have 16 full-time members and 40 navigators. Everybody knows what a full-time member is.
Correct.
What is a navigator?
Navigator is a volunteer who comes to us and goes through our volunteer orientation and decides that they want to work directly with the survivors. Of the volunteers that we have can support the services we do, but we don't put them directly with the survivors unless they've gone through navigator training, which involves about 40, 50 hours of training and then ongoing support and ongoing training in their lives. And then they have to qualify. If they've got extreme trauma or things they haven't worked through themselves, then they're not quite ready for this because it's very, very difficult.
Gotcha.
So of course they have to be a believer and they have to be with the mission of the organization, but they're volunteers. And so those navigators help to mentor the survivors on long-term relationships.
Very, very good, man. Yeah, that support system is so key.
Huge.
I find that, man, in any field, having a support group, a community it's key for recovery and survival. So thank you for sharing that information. Okay, so you also have over 500 community volunteers. Man, that's huge.
It is huge.
And you guys are growing.
We're growing like crazy, and we're grateful. The goal would be to shut the doors and close the place down because it's not needed anymore. But it seems that as the end approaches, wickedness seems to abound, and we have to battle that on all fronts. So that's it. We're trying. Well,
good stuff, man. Good stuff. We're going to talk about that more here in just a moment. Here are some of the topics that Troy and I are going to talk about today. Number 1, understanding the various forms of human trafficking. And I didn't know this as a layman, but there are different forms of human trafficking. Sex trafficking is just one level of that. And we're going to talk about maybe some various forms of human sex trafficking. We're going to also talk about some of the root causes and contributing factors that play a role in this. We'll discuss socioeconomic disparities, political instabilities, education, and other systematic issues that's really causing sexual trafficking or sex trafficking here, specifically in our area. We'll talk about law enforcement and the efforts of law enforcement and how you all are working in partnership with our local law enforcement agencies. And then we'll talk about prevention and strategies. And I really want to focus and hone in on that because it's important that our viewers know how to prevent and how to seek out help if they themselves or they know someone that is dealing with sex trafficking. It's important to have resources.
Yes, it is.
Okay. And then we'll do some Q&A as well.
All right, let's do it.
Awesome, my friend. So let's just start with this. I want to give some shout outs to Without Permission, which is your organization. I want to give some stats on your organization because you guys are doing some amazing things, man. And then we're going to dig into the information here. So number one, they have served more than 880 victims. And now, is that local here local here in the Central Valley?
91% of them call the Central Valley their home. 98% of them have called California their home.
Sure.
So almost all of them from right here at home. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, so 887 victims. You have trained more than 3,200 individuals through the juvenile hall system, which is powerful in itself. You have raised more than $4.7 million and invested that money back into the community. Man, kudos to your agency. That's so strong. It takes resources, right?
Lots of resources.
It takes lots of resources. You have logged more than 43,000 volunteer hours, more than 412. Is that $1,000? $412,000 has been raised by local church partners.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. I have 412, and I know that's not correct.
That's great.
Typo on my end. My apologies. And then you've also been within more than 32,000 school districts, providing prevention and training to people. Correct.
Serve 32,000 students in this
Sure,
district. Yes,
gotcha.
absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome.
Right.
Man, you guys are doing amazing things, and you're really, here it is. It's like that tin can, and you want to hit that tin can over, but you're hitting it with the plastic spoon, right? Man, the more you hit it, the more often you hit it, eventually there's going to be a penetration, right? And so you guys are doing what you're doing in your efforts to overcome this horrible situation, and you're doing a great job. Thank you. So let's go ahead and talk about, man, our first topic with understanding the various forms of human trafficking. I mentioned just a minute ago that there are multiple forms. You all focus specifically on sex trafficking, but what other forms of trafficking are there?
The primary other form is labor trafficking, where people are forced to do labor, and it could be familial. It could be from people that are immigrating into the country. It could be our local children. We find it a whole lot in massage parlors. We're part of writing a municipal code for massage parlors, even right here in the city of Modesto.
Really?
Yeah, there's over 81 massage parlors right now, and a lot of the sting operations have taken place through there, where there's been labor trafficking, along with sex trafficking.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to work with them. So labor trafficking would be the primary one. And of sex trafficking, there's various nuances of it as well, right? And so we're going to kind of get into what those trafficking methods are, I'm assuming, as we go on.
Sure. Let's go ahead and dig into that right now. So why don't you go ahead and talk about that?
So the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, they give us 4, and we have discovered it without permission. Those 4 trafficking methods are true right here at home. And the first one would be familial. That would be a family member is selling their child or selling their grandchild for sex.
Jesus.
And so some of the stories I'm going to share, just to be really honest with you, quite might trigger. If you have a history of abuse in your life, you might want to take a deep breath and watch this in segments.
Yeah.
But this is going to be a little tough to maybe hear, but it's important that we get this message out, not for shock value, but rather we want to make sure that we get the truth out. So the youngest one that we've served is 11 years old. Okay. We have multiple 11-year-olds that are on our list that we're serving currently even now, but the youngest one was 11. He was a boy, not a girl, trafficked by his family. He was taken out of his mother's home in Stockton, placed into his grandmother's home because mom wasn't fit, which was good. It was a good move on the part of the agency. However, they didn't know that grandma had a meth addiction. And so grandma chose to dress her grandson up as a little girl and sell him to deviant, evil, aggressive men multiple times every night for over a year. And then we were able to take this young boy and try to help bring him through the restoration process. You cannot do this, in my opinion, without the power of the Holy Spirit, without
absolutely,
God. So
absolutely.
we covered the prayers of the people. So that would be familial, an example of familial. Okay. An example maybe of buyer perpetrated would be a coach. One of our survivors shared with us, and this seems to happen, but a coach said, listen, if you want to play on the team on Friday, all you got to do is take some pictures. Nobody's ever going to see, nobody's ever going to know, and it was that exploitation that took place before. So that's kind of direct, and it kind of takes the trafficker out of it. The third one would be gang affiliation. If you're going to join a gang or be a part of a family of human beings, you have to be a part of supporting that economically. And if you don't bring anything to the table, then the option would be for you to sell yourself.
Wow.
And then the fourth one is the biggest one by far, and that one is the boyfriend pimp. That would be the one where the young lady most of the time would be approached through her vulnerabilities, which we'll discuss what those are.
Sure.
A trafficker, usually older, will try to identify those, play into those through force, fraud, or coercion, violence, trickery, or manipulation. Will try to draw that young lady into a relationship by being her boyfriend, and she feels wooed. She feels like she's found her soulmate, and from that, he's going to then downgrade her, just tear her down psychologically and emotionally to the point that she is dependent upon him, and he's separated her and isolated her from her family and from her friends and her network of support.
Sure. Yeah. Man, I tell you, I please forgive my reaction to some of the information that you're giving me. It's just things that, again, the everyday person does not even think about these kinds of things. What is the impact that you've seen that this kind of thing has on the individual? Let's talk about some of those 11-year-olds that you talk about. What kind of impact?
The deep trauma that they are experiencing is, first of all, it's denial initially. It's like, there's not a problem with me. They're perfectly happy or content with their life because of the force, fraud, or coercion, the violence, the trickery, and manipulation that they've experienced. They're so brainwashed into believing that this person is the only one who loves them, the only one who wants to support them.
Sure.
And so getting them to understand that you have been traumatized. You've been abused in your life. Now, when it comes to them actually being sold, some of our survivors can remember the name tags. They can remember the patches on the work clothes of the men who came into the hotel rooms during their lunch hour and then went home to their families that night. And so there's this demand thing that is, and who saves them from that? Well, the very one who put them into that. There's an old story about how do you tame an elephant? Well, it's known in Africa that when they want to tame an elephant, it has to be done when the elephant is a baby. And so what they'll do, Dana, is they'll separate the baby from the mother, which is what a trafficker will do, is separate and isolate them from their family.
Yeah.
And then the next thing they'll do is they'll just starve them and beat them down and tie them to a tree or whatever it is and anchor them into an anchoring point. And then after several days, that same elephant tamer will then put on a cloak, put on some sort of a costume so the elephant doesn't recognize them and approach them with a watermelon.
Really?
Begin to hand feed them. And then that baby elephant has a loyalty to the very one who was abusing them. Wow. And so when they're untied, the baby elephant no longer searches for mom. The baby elephant will follow the very one who abused them. It's very similar in trafficking, this whole method. It's beat them down, break them down, separate them, isolate them, and then you become their best friend and they're dependent upon you for every aspect they feel like they are in life. So the typical trafficked victim or survivor will go back to the game, much like a domestic violence victim will go back to the game 5 to 8 times before they fully break away because it's so deeply ingrained inside of them.
It's so familiar to them.
Yeah.
It's all they know. It's a secure place for them.
Yeah.
So I know you probably, because of certain policies that you have, you can't give specifics on certain cases. But the young boy that you just talked about a moment ago, how did you find out about this, and how hard was it to break that barrier in this young man's life?
Sure. Well, let me just start off by saying we don't rescue. Our organization doesn't rescue. We restore. So the police are the ones who rescue, the law enforcement, the sheriff's department, and so forth.
Gotcha.
And we collaborate with them. So once they get a call, or oftentimes they would arrest a juvenile, and they don't know they're a juvenile for prostitution. By the way, California SB 1322 from 2017 says there is no such thing as a child prostitute. There is no such thing as a child prostitute. So when they arrest them, they often look older than they are. When they take them to booking, that they're younger, we're then contacted as a partner agency, and then we are
Gotcha.
able to come in and our services would begin with them.
Gotcha. So has that child, and I'm sorry I keep going back to this, but it just breaks my heart, man. Has he recovered? Has he been restored? Give us an update on him.
Yeah, it all depends on what your definition of restored is, right?
Yes, sir.
It's the long journey. So my answer would be in the process.
Okay.
And the process will go as rapidly or whatever pace that boy wants. Here's the deal. Every trafficking victim has one thing in common. That one thing in common is all of the decision-making and control in their life has been taken away from them.
Sure.
So when we enter into a relationship with them, we don't control anything. We give them the power of choice for what and when, the pace that they want to do, and we're going to go on the journey with them. So he's in the process.
Good. Man, I tell you, it breaks my heart to hear that. There's so many people that are victims and they don't know how to be anything else. That's what I hear you saying. And it's overwhelmingly sad. And so what kind of impact, and we talked about that on on an individual basis, how is this impacting the community?
Yeah. Well, particularly, explain. Give me rephrase that. What do you mean?
Yeah, just so sex trafficking as a whole. Okay. We talked about some of the devastating, impacts that it has on the individual. How is this impacting our community? And what do we need to be looking for as a community? How do we even? And I'm probably getting ahead of myself, but man, I tell you, this is like overwhelming. Yeah, it's overwhelming.
It's a cultural thing. We have to make sure we address it as a community, as a culture, across all genres of every kind, right? It's a humanity issue is what it is. So just one stat that might help us understand a little bit more. 2 to 3, maybe up to 4 out of every 1,000 youth become a trafficking victim in the Central Valley.
Sure.
So that's kind of so we look at a high school that has 1,000 students in it. 3 to 4 of those are being trafficked right now. And so how do we help them? Well, it's a collaborative effort. Parents want their children to be safe. I want my grandchildren to be safe.
Sure.
What we're dealing with, Dana, is not what you see. If you saw The Sound of Freedom, incredible movie. If you saw Taken with Liam Neeson several years ago, that's a great movie. But if you see it, that's not how it happens in the United States. That might be in other countries, but it's not a snatch and grab here. It is a coercion over a course of time.
Sure.
It is, if we can understand what the vulnerabilities are in our children or in our children's peers and friends, then we can address those vulnerabilities, look out for those young people, and we're probably going to eradicate this thing at a much faster level than we did before. The traffickers are always going to be there. Why? Because it's an issue of supply and demand. As long as there is a demand for sex with children, there is going to be a supply provided by those that are evildoers.
Sure.
And this is a $150 billion a year industry. I don't know what that means, Dana. So I had to look it up. That one of the largest companies on the globe is Facebook.
Yeah.
And they generate $70.7 billion a year globally.
Right.
This industry generates twice as much for the sale of children for sex.
Wow.
So let me kind of put it in perspective for you. Where do the victims originate? From 3 primary countries, really all over the globe, but 3 primary countries. That would be the Philippines, Mexico, and hands down, bar none, the largest supplier of children for sex, for money, is the United States of America.
Really?
Absolutely, it is hands down. And also the largest purchaser of children for sex is found in the United States of America. And it's not an indictment against our nation. It's a reality that we need to eradicate this thing. You can't have the discussion without actually addressing also the issue of immigration, right?
Sure.
Children that are coming over the border. No matter where you're at on that whole issue, these children need help, right? And oftentimes they're being brought over through cartel industries and so forth, and they're selling these children or meeting them up. And these kids, while they're promised a better life and mom and dad will catch up with you later, there's a vast number of those young kids that are being sold into sex slavery.
Right. And one of the things that you said earlier that is different than other countries. So in the U.S., it's not a snatch and grab.
No.
It's more about a grooming process.
Very much a grooming process.
So that's probably a great segue into our next topic, talking about the root causes and contributing factors about for human sex trafficking. Let's talk about that just for a moment. So, what kind of person, number one, before we even dig into that, what kind of person is really susceptible? Is there a certain personality type or a certain ethnic group? I mean,
great question.
Let's talk about that.
Sure. We do not inflate our stats. Every stat you've heard so far is the gospel truth.
Yeah.
We make sure we track it very honestly. And so when it comes to determining it, is there an ethnicity involved with it? Well, it's more vulnerabilities that are a little bit different than that. So one of the vulnerabilities would be poverty.
Sure.
Just because you have a vulnerability doesn't mean a child is being, or a young adult is being exploited sexually. Sure. But if they have a poverty, so let me give a couple of examples. A girl at school is identified by an exploiter who oftentimes in high school would be working for or working with the head girlfriend, if you will, of a perpetrator, of a trafficker. Anyway, if that girl is identified as not having something, like she has a ratty jacket on or she has shoes that are worn, they can identify that vulnerability very quickly. If you're at a gas station, one of our survivors shared she met her trafficker at the gas station. How? Well, she was pumping gas and she could only afford to put $5, $7 in her tank. The trafficker just happened to be there, paid attention, said, "I'll fill your tank up for you." Struck a relationship, began that with her, and in time, he drew her away from her family support network and brought her in through her vulnerability of perceived. She might not even be poor. Right. She was broke. There's a difference, right? She didn't have any money. Right. And so poverty would be one of those. Another one would be if a child has been sexually, physically abused in the past. Not their fault, but they're now more vulnerable because likely of the confidence, the self-esteem that they have that's kind of been beaten down. So a trafficker can lean into that a little bit. You need protection. I'll be the one to protect you.
Gotcha.
If a child is bullied, and we say bullied, oftentimes it could be even from like the LGBTQ community, right? It could be ostracized maybe from their family. That can be picked up by a trafficker very quickly. If a child is homeless, if they run away, stats tell us right here in the Central Valley, a homeless teenager will be approached by a trafficker within 24 hours of them being out on the streets. So they're paying attention to these vulnerabilities. They're looking, why? Because supply and demand. This child is a potential net income for them multiple times over every single day if they can just groom them in the right way. So it's an investment of their time. It's an evil, vile thing. And another vulnerability is one of the biggest ones is the foster care system. My wife is a product of the foster care system. And so if a child is a foster child, it doesn't mean that they are a trafficking victim.
There's no absolutes.
Not at all.
No absolutes,
But over 50% of the ones that are rescued out of human trafficking that are juveniles come out of the foster care system. And so if you think about it this way, true story of a survivor was taken out of their home because mom died, dad was physically abusive, and sexually abusive and everything, placed in a foster home. Dad happened to be a police officer. So
wow.
Taken out of that home, put into foster care. The next 3 foster homes were equally as abusive as their home was. Of course, CPS wasn't aware of that at the time, right? And so now this young girl runs away.
Right.
Logically, she should. I mean, it just makes sense to all of us. I mean, she couldn't trust her family. Her outside family didn't take her in. She couldn't trust the system. She certainly couldn't trust law enforcement. And so what was her only option? She needed to protect herself, so she ran. And by running, she then put herself into a whole nother vulnerable category. It comes into it. So we got to watch out for our foster kids as well. Sure.
So you talked about some of the socioeconomic disparities and what those profiles look like. You've talked about some of the other systematic issues that are causing human sex trafficking. Let's talk about some of the I want to talk about the profile of a predator.
Okay.
So so we've talked about some of the things that our victims and our survivors have gone through in their early childhood or at home. What are some things that a perpetrator may have experienced that caused them to be a perpetrator and not a victim?
Okay. Well, first of all, if they're going to be a sex trafficking perpetrator or a sex trafficker, they're probably going to have a sex addiction. right? So we have to have the conversation about two things. One lane would be pornography. Pornography is a slippery slope. We know that it desensitizes and rewires our brain.
Sure.
So one way that we can battle sex trafficking in our culture is to battle the epidemic of pornography. And we can come against it and get people the resource and the help that they need.
Okay.
Because what happens is pornography is always progressive. It's never satisfactory where it's at.
It's true.
So eventually the child or the person that they're viewing or looking at becomes younger and younger. And eventually they're going to want some sort of a desire for it to become more and more deviant and more violent. And so we also teach a lot. We've helped assist to shut down over 30,000 child porn sites, which is an exciting thing. However, in that same amount of time, 180,000 of them have popped up as well on the internet. So we're going uphill against the flow with this, but we're going to continue to grip the plow and do what we can.
For sure.
So we're dealing with the issue of pornography that is a slippery slope that draws people into it, but it's also an issue of control, of violence, of arrogance, of I will get what it's narcissistic tendencies is what it is. And so those are the kind of the aspects of a trafficker.
You know, man, I love how God has chosen you from a kingdom perspective to put you on the front lines here, because we mentioned this earlier. You said this, that you cannot battle this just in practical terms or through the flesh. A lot of this stuff is really it's spiritual.
It is.
It's spiritual, man. And it's praise God that you are a believer and that are most of your staff, they're also believers.
Everybody on our staff.
That's so good, man. So what are you all doing from a spiritual perspective in preparation for some of this frontline battle?
Yeah, great question. Well, first of all, our staff is in multiple offices around the community. So we have staff at our office in Modesto, our admin office. We have a confidential location day facility. So this is a wonderful place. It's called Just His House. It's a play on justice. And so where our survivors can come and they can hang out and they can get services and they can get counseling. Everything's free. We offer them resources. They can take a shower if they want to.
Sure.
They get cooking classes, all kinds of. Last night we had an Easter party for our female survivors. It was a powerful time.
Yeah.
So they get to come to that. We have offices at probation and juvenile hall, at the Family Justice Center. Same thing in Stockton, at the Family Justice Center and probation we're moving into as well. So all of these offices that are, and CSA as well, which is CPS right here in Stanislaus County, we have offices there. So all of these staff members are kind of fragmented, serving the culture that they're called to. So I bring them all together on Tuesday mornings.
Yeah.
We have an hour of prayer every Tuesday from 9 to 10.
So powerful.
And it's a time that I get to speak into their lives. We get to pray for the needs, and we just arm ourselves with the full armor of God, right?
Man.
Yeah.
You have to, man. You got to put on that helmet of salvation. I can't imagine. You have to be called and chosen to do this job. I can imagine. Yeah. I mean, I don't think the average person could do that. I mean, just even having this conversation, the weight, the mental weight of this is just, it's heavy. And so, it's God. It has to be God that's empowering you all to do this. Wow. Okay. So let's talk about, are there any other systemic issues that you all are seeing that we haven't covered in regards to root causes or contributing factors?
Yeah, I think we've covered the root causes through the vulnerabilities. That's the biggest thing that we have. So I think that's a wise thing. Okay. Look out for those vulnerabilities and those kids that fall in those categories.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. Some of the programs that you were just talking about, like cooking classes and all those other resources, the average person, I don't think of those as resources. That's just normal stuff.
Yeah.
But you all are providing a place of normalcy for your survivors, which is so, again, it's key in the recovery. Important things like waking up and making your bed. That's just like a normal thing. But for a person that may be dealing with sex trafficking, that they don't have that opportunity.
No, and they come into the house, we've got to lock their phones in lock boxes. We don't let them have that outside communication at that point. They can lay down and take a nap, but it smells good. It feels good. It's a home environment. It's not a business kind of place. It's like, this is what home should be. We make a meal. We eat a meal around a table together. We talk like a family.
Good.
It's a normalcy that is not normal to them. It's upstream from what they're used to. So,
And how many do you have in one particular particular time?
Well, we try to limit it based upon their age and if they have a gang affiliation, we try to separate them out from all the, we try to do all that. So it like last night, we probably had at our Easter party for that particular group, there was maybe 20, 22 people there. So it was a good group.
Okay. And so you have one group probably for people that are, older. One group for
older. And then the boys have a separate day that they're able to use the facility and so forth.
Good. Okay, man. All right. So let's talk about law enforcement and the efforts that, law enforcement is involved with and how you're partnering with them.
Okay. Well, we want to give a shout out, first of all, to the Sheriff's Department, to the Police Department.
Absolutely.
Right here in Stanislaus County. They're doing a great job, and we appreciate so much our District Attorney, Jeff. He does a phenomenal job. Yeah. He's a real advocate for the battle against human trafficking right here at home. So they're doing a phenomenal job. And so our relationship with them would be if they run into a C-sec child, a commercially sexually exploited child, or they need services from without permission for somebody that's over the age of 18, they would call upon us. And Dana, this is what happens. When they call upon our 24-hour crisis support line that we man, that we offer, they would call, any community member can call that as well, but the law enforcement would call, we'll show up within a couple of hours with a backpack.
Sure.
And the backpack's called a compassion bag.
Okay.
And that compassion bag is worth its weight in gold because that's how we get into the life and build trust with this survivor. Right. We want to draw them out of the game because law enforcement can only do so much, and then our services would then take over. So that compassion bag is given to them. Sometimes they'll just really cuss us out, or they'll just deny services, but they take the backpack. 9 times out of 10, within a couple of weeks, they end up giving us a call because we've got numbers and information in the bag along with high quality goods. So if people want to be a part of this and they don't know how to be a part of this, you can just go to our website and you can actually order all the bag stuff on Amazon and have it directly shipped to us. But we need compassion bags like crazy all the time.
Sure. We're going to do this at the top of the show. But give us a website right now that our listeners can go to if they want to participate in that.
It's withoutpermission.org, withoutpermission.org. And there's all kinds of tools. There's also family resource guides. So you can take a look at the website. You can download some things. You can even print some things off. I recommend that you do take the family resource guide. It's a discussion guide with your family. Throw it on the table. It's not offensive in any way, but it opens up the conversation about what is going on in our community and how can we protect our kids and empower them to know exactly what's going on.
Sure, withoutpermission.org.
.org, you got
it. Awesome. Listeners, if you want to go and you want to partner with them, you want to volunteer, if you want to donate, withoutpermission.org, you want to go to that website. So let's go ahead and circle back to the law enforcement. Yes. What are some of the legal frameworks that law enforcement is dealing with when it in regards to sex trafficking?
Sure. So there's a couple of laws that have been enacted. I want to kind of go back to the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2017-2018 is when it started.
Okay.
That doesn't seem like that long. Well, actually, that law was in 2001. Okay, 2001. So we're dealing with, for you and I, that didn't seem like that long ago. For a young person, that's forever ago.
Yeah.
However, it wasn't until that law was passed that in the United States of America, if you sold another human being for sex, whether they were over the age of 18 or under the age of 18, it was a misdemeanor.
Wow.
It was a misdemeanor if you sold a child for sex prior to the year 2000. After the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, it made it a felony. And since then, there's been a lot more legislation that we're advocates of. We work with our legislators. We work with our congressmen and women. We're trying to press for harsher penalties, stiffer penalties for these traffickers. Now, there's 3 people involved in this crime. There's the survivor, there's the perpetrator, the buyer, but there's the trafficker. And we want to see that trafficker, high consequences, felony. We want to see them locked up for long term. Unfortunately, they might get maybe 36 months for trafficking.
What kind of laws are against the actual buyer themselves?
The perpetrator themselves. Okay, well, there's a lot of rules. Unfortunately, that's not considered a high level crime. The purchaser. So
even if it's a minor,
if it's a minor, it does change it a little bit. But they can claim that they never knew. And the challenge with prosecuting is the survivor has to testify against the one. And so we've been able to work with our legislation, with the local, and it's kind of exciting that now those that are survivors can testify from a different building in a different room and not have to face by way of video. So that's kind of a good step in the right direction.
Right.
California SB 1322, that's the law that decriminalized prostitution for people under the age of 18. So it's a lot of legal jargon, but basically it means that there is no longer such thing as a child prostitute. So they can't be prosecuted when it's discovered that they are a part of that ring, we try to then restore them. Even if they don't want services, they are a victim through force, fraud, or coercion. And so we're there to serve them.
I don't even know how to respond to that.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah.
That's wild. Man, so that's why your agency is really pushing awareness, and man, there needs to be more awareness, not just against the victim or the survivor and the trafficker, but the perpetrator as well.
So may I comment on that?
Absolutely.
All right. So we want to work on all of these, so that if we just work on the supply side and don't work on the demand side,
sure,
we're never going to make any headway. So we aggressively work on the demand side as well. And we have a ministry called Epic Patrol.
Sure.
We collaborate with a national organization. And the goal of this organization is to intercept calls from the purchasers, either to the traffickers or directly to the survivors. And so these guys will gather, they're trained, it takes extensive training for this, but they're volunteers. They come in and they sit around the table with their computers and the program system and so forth. It's amazing to watch them work. But on their computers, they intercept calls. Text messages is how most of them do it, through escort service sites, trying to purchase girls for sex. And so when they're trying to purchase, these guys will then speak the language that these purchasers are speaking with the intent of trying to get them on the phone.
Sure.
Now, as much as we want to punch them in the throat, can we just say that?
Yeah. That's probably going
pretty
easy.
real.
Yeah.
Right. As much, but our goal in that moment is not to shame or humiliate them. It's to get them on the phone so we can stop this evil.
Yeah.
So what we do is, if they do call us, then we'll be like, hey, hello. And they're like, hey, is Melissa there? No, Melissa's not. Did you know Melissa is probably 14 years old and is being sex trafficked? Do you know what sex trafficking is? And sometimes they'll hang up or cuss us out, but other times they'll stay on the phone. Most of those calls for up to 30 minutes that they stay on the phone with us. And so we're able to then talk to them and find out what their purpose and purchasing sex is, especially with kids.
Sure.
Did you even know? Most of the time, we're intercepting calls from first timers, or they've just gotten into the game. And for that, we say, thank you, Lord, because we can stop this. One guy in a recent call was like, hold on a second. I want to keep talking, but my daughter's crying. I got to go tuck her in.
Wow.
And so you start thinking about, how does somebody get to that place in their life that they've got a family and a daughter, and yet they're purchasing people for sex, right? How is that? We live in an inside-out, upside-down world.
Yeah.
If we can then refer them to a church, to a sex recovery group, something in their area that will get them some services and get them some help, and then follow up on those. So that's an epic patrol that we're trying to do to reduce the demand side.
Yeah. Man, I have so many questions in my mind. Let me ask you this question. Let's talk about the opportunity on gaming. There's a lot of young people who are into gaming and being able to talk to whomever they're playing with on the game console.
So digital exploitation is the fastest, most aggressive way of recruiting people for sex trafficking, in particular minors. The number one gaming app is Fortnite to recruit kids right now for sex trafficking. Not because the game is evil, so you don't have to get rid of the game, but you've got to put parameters on it. We've got to make sure that we're paying attention to those.
Sure.
And so same thing with social media, right? Which is like, we're not going to have social. Maybe that's the parental choice, but we can also make sure we understand and educate ourselves to put parameters on our social media for our children.
Sure.
There's a great site you can go to get resources. It's called smartsocial.com. I highly recommend that. Smartsocial.com.
Okay.
Yeah, you can go there, get resources, teaching, training. A lot of parents, grandparents, I don't have a clue, and everything changes so fast. Yeah, I don't know if you know, but a lot of the apps that kids can get, particularly if they're trying to hide something from their parents, might be actually hidden on the phone behind another picture, right? A calculator, it says, but that's actually not a calculator. And parents think, well, they're not on anything, but they actually are. Why? Well, they've been lured, they've been enticed, or perhaps they've just been pressured by their peers, right?
Right.
And they've given into that peer pressure. So some of the kids were thought that they were going to a gaming conference. They were lured by 7 evil individuals to this gaming conference. And when they got there, the parents were proud. These were gamers, and parents wanted them to have a hope in a future, have something in their life. And so they were invited to this gaming conference because they were so good. The reality was it was not that, and they were then trapped into a trafficking ring that was eventually discovered by law enforcement and were rescued out of that.
Yeah, man, I know a lot of parents, and I really want to talk about this because a lot of parents, they don't have a clue, or they don't have time, or they don't care. I don't know what it is, but a lot of parents parents are just allowing their child to sit in a dark room on the gaming console for hours on end, not knowing who their child is interacting with. And this is and what's the term for it?
Yeah, it's online digital exploitation.
Digital exploitation. And so this is one area that perpetrators are really, really starting to focus in on.
Honed in on.
Oh my gosh. So what can parents do, man? I mean, how would you handle it as a father?
Well, I'm going to backtrack just a little bit. So you get a 15-year-old girl, normal discipline, sent to her room. She gets on Snapchat, Discord, whatever the app is, and she begins to just vent. My parents are so lame. I can't believe this. I'm so frustrated. Normal stuff that a teenager might feel, but now she's expressing it out there on social media because she has no parameters, no safeguards, no privacy settings. A trafficker picks up on that and pays close attention to that, pretends to be somebody else, and engages in girl, you are treated so unfairly. That's not right. That's so wrong. I can't believe they treat you like that. And draws, hey, what's your favorite band? Did you listen to a new Taylor Swift song? Do you watch The Office? Hey, do you have Mr. Jones for history class? How does he know that? Well, because of her social media history. He can see what school she goes to, see what neighborhood she lives in, through the selfies that she posts on there. He can even see by Google Earth what her house layout is. Hey, are you the house with the greenhouse with the white fence?
Wow.
Like, I walk by your house every day. And the truth is, he's 40, 50 miles down the road.
Wow.
And how about we just meet up at the park? And she gets to the park and she sees an older man, rather than maybe in his young 30s, as opposed to somebody that she thought this boyfriend was going to be. And he coerces her and says, wait. I know. I told you that. But I'm telling you, we have a connection. Don't we have a connection? And then the relationship begins to take place. And the girl that I'm speaking of in this case was a middle-class young lady, family, Bay Area workers, commuters coming back home again, didn't have any of the vulnerabilities except for parents absent from the home. Parents were working hard. They weren't doing anything wrong.
Sure.
But a trafficker moved in because of her complaining and so forth online. So we've got to watch that with our kids.
Man, that's a powerful term that you keep using, the vulnerabilities, because our youth is dealing with them. And they are increasing those vulnerabilities because of social media and media in general. I mean, you just named Taylor Swift. I mean, man, the music, the spirit behind the music, and the spirit behind ads and all even commercials nowadays. There is a spirit behind this, which is really exacerbating this issue, right? I mean,
so there's a lot of cultural nuances. There's books. There's Doja Cat. Doja Cat is a popular singer. She
never even heard of her.
I hadn't either prior to this, but then I did some research on 2021 Grammy Award-winning artist for R&B. The song that she got the Grammy for is called Bottom, B-I-T-C-H.
Wow.
And that is actually the term that is used for the young lady that is recruiting on behalf of the trafficker in the high schoolers.
Man.
She's dressed up as a girl, riding on a school bus, skipping across the street, championing being a bottom, B-I-T-C-H.
Wow.
And our girls, we voted for that. We as a culture said that's an acceptable song. We're going to not only accept it, we're going to promote it. And these are cultural nuances that we as families need to stand up against. Pay attention to the music. I just got my doctorate, right? So I've been working hard.
Congratulations.
I read about 20,000 hard reading academic pages of the last 4 years, right, to be able to do this and all this writing and stuff. There's a book. I brought it with me. I don't have it right in front of me, but it's called Pimpology. It's sold on Pimpology, sold on Amazon. And I tell you this because I'm a pretty fast reader.
Sure.
I haven't even gotten through half the book because I get so angry or so broken when I read it. It is a 48-step. How do you start your own stable? How do you recruit your own?
Jesus.
He says that the world is made up of pimps and hoes, and which one are you going to be? And I'm like, our culture is buying this and reading this on Amazon. I was given a presentation talking about some of the things that are shifting culture. There is a pole dancing kit targeted toward preschoolers, and the subtitle says, "Unlock the sex kitten inside of you." And parents are buying this, Dana, for their kids because they think it's so cute and so adorable. It's not cute. It's destroying a generation. And so we see these things that are taking place in culture, and we have to take a stand against these things and actually make sure that we're shaping the family accordingly. Yeah. I know. These things are hard to hear. It's hard to talk about. It's hard to receive. This is really heavy stuff, but it's really happening. Yeah.
That's someone's daughter. That's someone's granddaughter. That's someone's child. I think about my own family, and I don't even know what to say. I don't know what to say, man. It's heartbreaking. But I really appreciate you sharing all this information, because knowledge is power, and we need to know what to do.
Yeah,
we need to know what to do, and
yeah, and we need to be broken over this sin. We need to acknowledge its real existence, and we need to do something about it as a culture. So I'm really proud of you for opening up the window in your podcast. To be able to
absolutely, my friend. It's the responsibility of healthy, God-fearing adults, mm-hmm. and the responsibility of the church, and responsibility of those who know right from wrong to inform and to be informed. And I'm learning some things today, man, that I had no idea that was taking place in my own backyard, and so thank you again for sharing the information that you're sharing. Let's talk about prevention and intervention strategies. I think that's a great segue into this next topic. What can we do? How can we prevent? How can we intervene with some of this stuff that we're talking about today?
Yeah, well, it kind of goes back to basic 101 parenting. Time seems to be getting short for everybody, right? We have less day, right? And although the hours are still the same as they were a generation or two ago, have dinner together, sit down as a family, get into your children's lives, make sure that you, if you can, try to keep, especially for the younger children, try to keep all digital access to a public place in the living room or in the kitchen so that it's always visible. I would say check the phones. Don't let them have their phones in their rooms or in the bathroom. Keep the phones present. If they're going to have them, keep them out there. Just start smart. And if you start smart, you never have to tighten up later on.
That's good. Let's talk about that just for a minute. There needs to be a cadence with that, right? That has to be a normal way of living. You can't just loosen the purse strings or loosen the just have no sense of connection with your child, and then all of a sudden you want to boom, I'm going to implement these. You can't be on your phone. You can't do this. You can't go there. That has to be a way of life that you are having relationship with your children and you be involved in their lives. And it starts, man, from infancy, right?
It says, I think it was Barna that recently put out a stat that the average Christian sitting in church today will tap their screen on their phone during the church service between 40 and 60 times.
The
average Christian will do that because they're just curious. They can't. It's an addiction that we have in culture. So where does it start? It starts with the parents. So if the parents put boundaries on themselves and say, I'm not going to have my phone at the dinner table, or there's a basket for it, we're going to drop it in there. Then the kids will naturally want to do that as well. We set the bar. It's set with us. So we have to be wise as serpents, harmless as doves.
Harmless
right?
as doves. As doves. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about some intervention strategies. How do we intervene? How do we what's my word?
Prevent.
How do we prevent? And intervene is what I'm trying to say. In some of the things that we're talking about.
All right. Well. Again, it goes back to the vulnerability discussion. Pay attention to who's the vulnerable people group around you, and then don't leave them isolated. Don't allow that to take place. Befriend, pay attention, encourage, offer assistance. And then if you see something, say something. Here's the deal. Every law enforcement agency and officer that I've spoken with in my tenure thus far have said to us, we would rather have 20 unfounded reports than miss the child that is out there. So if you see something, say something. Here's the other deal. Don't call our 24-hour crisis support line if you see something, call 911 right away, and then they'll dispatch us. Or you can call us for services because you've seen something and you need some support. We're there for you. But what we really encourage you to do is call the authorities immediately. If you see something happening, say something, get it out there. And the other thing is becoming educated. There's these family guides that we have that are available at withoutpermission.org. You can download. There's a lot of great sites out there. Polaris is a good site. The National Center of Missing and Exploited Children is a great site to go to. It's the site that you might think of America's Most Wanted. You might think of the milk cartons, but they have so many more resources than just that. So we encourage you to go to those. So we collaborate with these national organizations as well.
Yeah.
Polaris issues a map. And it's called the Polaris map.
Yeah.
And on the national map, where you see the bright red, that's where most of the human trafficking hotline calls have come in. Dana, you might expect that on the East Coast, New York, New Jersey, down to Miami, even into Chicago, because they're high populated areas have international ports and airports, right? You might expect it across the southern portion of the United States where the border is at, right?
Right.
And you might expect it to in Las Vegas as a real bright red one. What we don't expect is the Central Valley to be one of the brightest red ones. And the question is why? Well, it's an issue of distribution. Remember, trafficking at its essence is something we all participate in. Okay. Now listen to this closely. When you brushed your teeth this morning, you participated in trafficking because the toothbrush was manufactured somewhere. It was moved to a distribution point. It was put on a truck and put into a retail establishment, and then you bought it. Wow. So the toothbrush was trafficked. So really all trafficking means is moving product for sale.
Sure.
In this case, it's human trafficking.
Okay.
So we're moving. So it's a mobile industry, right?
Sure.
So if you look around in the Central Valley, what's the fastest buildings that are going up? It are distribution centers, right? The trucking. Why? If industry, if the business community knows that the Central Valley is the hub between the I-80, the I-10 across the southern part of the United States, and the I-5 that connects them, and we're right in the center of all that, that's why the distribution centers are being built, because it's a good place to store product before it's sent to the retail establishments. Well, human traffickers know the same thing. This is in the center of not only the national circuit, but the state circuit and the local circuit. It's all happening. And I don't want people to be paranoid. I want us to be aware of that. So being aware, knowing that, paying attention is a big part of it.
And it's the struggle with that is that there's probably, you can't identify it just looking at it. I mean, it's probably all kinds of vehicles, all kinds of people, all kinds of situations that you just really can't put a label on or identify, right?
So I have, and I'll share this with you, and I realize we're on a podcast that people don't want to be able to see it, but on this card, it kind of lists the flags of a victim, and kind of want to go over this with your audience, which might help us. And we give all of these resources. We have so many resources that are on our website. But if they have an older boyfriend, if you notice somebody, a young person carrying multiple cell phones, they don't need more than one cell phone. A lot of times their trafficker or their boyfriend pimp that they aren't aware is a boyfriend pimp will give them a hotline of love, right? You and I are the only ones that can communicate on this one. It's just between you and us. And she's manipulated into believing that's what it is. The truth is he wants to track her, and she better answer that phone every single time. So if you see unexplained bruises or injuries, the traffickers will tattoo or will brand their trafficking victims. So part of without permission, what we do is we provide a tattoo removal services for these young people that want to have them removed, but they're branded oftentimes because they're owned by them. And then if there's sudden changes in their wardrobe, good or bad. If they're wearing something that is inappropriate for the weather. Now, teenagers will be teenagers, right? But if they're wearing a hooded sweatshirt with the hood up and it's 104 degrees outside, they're covering something up. Probably some bruises, probably some branding. Something's happening. It might not be trafficking, but something's going on, and we need to pay attention and address those issues. So we, as a culture, need to step up to the plate.
I'm glad you said that, because I've noticed that in the younger population, they do that a lot. In the summertime, it's 105 degrees, and they're wearing a hoodie outside.
Well, sometimes, Dana, good point. Sometimes it's just teenagers being teenagers, right? We were all like nuts when we were teenagers to some level. And, another thing is if they eat as if they're ravenous. Well, that could also be a normal teenager. But a lot of times the traffickers will starve them or deny them food because they're more valuable to them if they're skinny. And they how do they starve them when they're not with them all the time? Well, they I know which room your sister's in. I know what house she's at. I will get her. I will kill her.
Wow.
And she believes him. And so she's not going to eat for 3 days because she's going to. And so when you put food in front of her, or him, they're just going to suck up that food. So that's the kind of thing too. And what are the tactics of traffickers? I said they want to separate them from their friends and their families. They want to control them. That's the big thing, through texting, through phone calls, through internet tracking. They want to make sure that there's dependency upon them. So how do they do that? Through fear tactics with them. So if you see a young person that is crying, that is depressed, that is truant, that didn't used to be this way, something is going on in their life. They've got unexplained anxiety or fear inside of them. It's trauma, and then that bond is extreme with their trafficker. The trafficker is like the baby elephant tamer, right? It's the one who put them in the environment to be used and abused by the purchasers, but he's also the one to save them from that environment, to bring them out. Well, I'm here for you now. I'm not going to let that happen to you again, which is totally a lie.
Wow.
Yeah.
So there's no absolutes here, but we need to start paying attention to some of the smaller details.
Yes, absolutely.
Some of the telltale signs. Man, let me ask you a couple questions here, Troy. We're at the top of the hour, but we're covering so much good territory here. Sure. What are some of the most significant challenges faced by victims or survivors of sex trafficking?
Yeah, trust.
Okay.
They've had the control removed from them,
sure.
and so being able to trust another human being is a very, very difficult thing to do.
Yeah. Okay. And a couple more questions here. How do you see the landscape of human sex trafficking evolving in the coming years? What are some of the challenges that we're going to be facing here coming up?
Well, legislation is finally starting to catch up with
sure.
the epidemic of what's happening in culture. So that is a real win for us. Another thing is, even through media, through movies and so forth, like The Sound of Freedom, that come out, it's kind of brought it to the cusp of society.
Sure.
We're starting to pay attention to it. So that's a very, very good thing that we're
sure.
seeing. So it's not all terrible and all bad. But again, it's an issue of supply and demand.
Yeah.
And so the international cartels and the domestic gangs are understanding now that it's very profitable. Where they would be in trafficking of guns or trafficking of narcotics, those items can be sold one time.
Sure.
But a child can be sold 6 or 7 times every single night, every single day of the week. And so they're realizing that this is much more profitable to invest your time and energy into trafficking. And so the grooming and the drawing out of relationship, the isolation and so forth, that is what we need to pay attention to in culture.
Are there possibilities for the black market to get even darker? With technology and all the other stuff out there, what else? What else can we?
Well, the girls aren't mostly girls, but they're not walking the track nearly as much as what we would say. That what they say with the prostitution industry is walking the track or the blade. That's not really happening because the purchasing is taking place through digital. It would be the sites online that are escort services. They're not escort services. They are marketing our children for sex, right? And so we're trying to get those shut down as fast as we can, but paying attention to those. And guess what? This is not the dark web. This is all on the regular internet. And so thank God for law enforcement, and they're stepping up their game and putting a lot more resources toward digital exploitation of our children. And the consequences for child porn have gone through the roof. We're really, really grateful for that, as long as they're being prosecuted.
Yes, sir.
So,
Yes, sir. Wow. I tell you, man, there is just, we have to do a better job. And when I say we, I mean just the general population. We have to do a better job. And thank you so much, man, for everything that your agency is doing, the resources that you're providing to victims and their families. Let's just say someone wants to get involved to join the fight without permission. How can they do that?
Okay, a couple ways. First of all, if you attend a church in the Central Valley, we do presentations. I'm a pastor and minister. I'd love to come minister at your church and share some of these facts with your congregation. So reach out to your pastor and have them reach out to withoutpermission.org, and we'd love to. We never, ever charge a dime for that. Secondly, go to withoutpermission.org. There's always a tab on there for volunteers. The first step would be go to a volunteer orientation. We do those about every 5 to 6 weeks. They're just 2 hours. We do one in San Joaquin County, one in Stanislaus County every 5 weeks or so. So you can attend one of those and then learn more about maybe you'd like to cook. We like to provide a meal, like we said, at our Justice House, our day facility for our survivors. Maybe you can prepare a meal once a month and bring that meal in.
Yeah.
Maybe you can man a resource table at a community event. Just stand there and give out free resources. We want to have a presence everywhere to make sure that the community is aware that this is happening around us.
Very good, very good. Yeah, if you're listening today and you feel like that you've been a victim of human sex trafficking, or you know someone that you're seeing some of the signs, please reach out and get help. There is help and there is light at the end of the tunnel. Yes. Troy, listen, man, I want to say thank you for being here on the show today. It has been enlightening and eye-opening, and I hope that we can have more conversations and that we can do something to maybe partner together to help you, charge the front lines in finding some resolution for this. Listen, if LifeTalk Radio has been informative for you today and we've added value to your life and provided you with actionable strategies, we ask you again to like, share, and subscribe. Troy, if people want to get in touch with you, I know we've already said it probably a few times, but how can they contact you, my friend?
Go to withoutpermission.org. You can see a tab on there, contact us. You can reach out by phone, reach out by email, but we'd love to chat with you. If you are a victim or know somebody that is struggling in the area of exploitation sexually or sex trafficking, please call our 24-hour crisis support line, which can be found at withoutpermission.org. We'd love to serve you and offer you any resources that we can.
Sure. Why don't you give that number to them so they can have that?
Absolutely. I'm going to read that number to you right now. It's the 24-hour crisis support line is 209-277-7758. I'll say it again, 209-277-7758. 24 hours a day, we answer that phone, and we want to offer you any resources and support we possibly can.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on our next episode of LifeTalk Radio.